well, at least when DC has tried to replicate what Marvel's done, hasn't really worked. And then when they kind of go their own way, we kind of feel like it does. So I don't know. We wanted to talk about that for a little bit because I think it really is applicable to Peacemaker. Peacemaker is such an odd show. It's something that Marvel has never even come close to doing in terms of style and tone and anything else like that. And yet it really, really works. Whereas, DC trying to do an MCU team up or whatever really kind of fell flat. So I don't know, Paul, what are your initial thoughts on this? Because it is really odd how different they are.
Yeah, as everybody that listens to the pod regularly knows, Marvel has hit a rough patch creatively. Words are hard.
Words are hard. It's okay.
It's difficult. But what I have found interesting is that for the past decade, DC, who has the vastly more interesting comic material to work with, has failed to start an expanded universe like Marvel. And they have tried. They have done multiple reshoots, multiple different movies, failed movies, they just cannot do it. But where they've found success, and it seems like they're leaning more into this as they realize this, is when they do stuff that is very different, very more grown up, and lean into the absurdity. They succeed. Excuse me. Like the Zack Snyder cut. It is. I mean, it's 4x3.
Yeah.
What the frick?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's wild.
Like that. What? It's just. What are you doing? And then the Joker, or not the Joker. Sorry.
Joker.
And then the second Suicide Squad, the original Suicide Squad felt like to me it was trying to be Marvel-ish. The Joss Whedon DC team up Justice League was trying to be too Marvel-ish.
Yeah.
They
literally brought Joss Whedon in to make it more Marvel, right? Like they literally took what Snyder was going to do and essentially scrapped it. And they were like, well, let's bring in Joss Whedon and brighten this thing up and add a whole bunch of jokes. Just like it didn't land. None of that stuff worked well at all. But you're absolutely right. Then we finally got the Snyder cut after years. And it's funny because like everybody was like, with the Snyder cut, you go, well, there probably isn't a Snyder cut. It probably doesn't exist. It actually existed. And then more importantly, everybody then was like, well, it's probably going to be terrible, which is why they scrapped it. But in fact, it was definitely better. And it would have been really interesting to me to see what Snyder could have done had he finished that movie the way that he'd wanted and done whatever reshoots he'd needed at the time to kind of get that all together the way that he would have originally envisioned. I think the Snyder cut's probably pretty close, but like, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because you're right. Like Joker. I would certainly argue Aquaman. I've talked about Aquaman on this series before. Like I like Aquaman because it leans into just the bizarre. Like it's such a weird movie, but it's having a lot of fun with itself. And Shazam as well is a very strange movie in a lot of ways, but it's also just a really great family movie. Like Shazam is to the extent that you have in this world, like you actually just have a really good, like Chris Columbus type family comedy that also involves a superhero, and it works super, super well. And then Peacemaker and what we're about to get into with the Batman, right? I mean, I'm fascinated by this. Like I'm super fascinated by the Batman at this point because it just seems like such an incredible departure from everything else we've seen, and yet I can't help but having some sort of high hopes for it because I just kind of feel like it's going to work. Because they've taken big swings like this, that's been the stuff that really has seemed like it's stuck.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, Marvel has really. I've been on record that I'm not a big fan of superhero stuff. I think, and the reason why is because there's a lot of easy ways to get lazy, and Marvel has gotten to that point where it's just kind of lazy and it's boring, and no matter how much money you put into special effects, it's not going to help. But I think where DC is getting it right is they have to tell interesting stories to differentiate themselves, and to build back some of the goodwill that they have squandered over the last decade.
Yeah.
But the Batman that is releasing here in a month and a half or something like that, when they first announced Robert Pattinson was going to be the Batman, I scratched my head.
Yeah.
But I usually try to go into things very with expectations very low. But with my love of film noir movies and of my love of Batman, oh gosh, I am hard pressed not to get excited about this. And the more I see, the more I'm happy, excited for it. And I can't remember last time. I've never been more excited for a Marvel movie, even like Endgame. I didn't care. Like, I don't care. And I like, this is, it's fat. Like, it's just really interesting to me because I feel like I'm one of the few that just Marvel has never done it for me. So it's nice that somebody's trying to do something interesting, and DC seems to be the place to do it right now.
Yeah, I agree that these days, you know, and probably for the last several years now, Marvel just feels very factory made. Like, there's a formula, you plug in all of the inputs, and out comes a superhero movie. Hooray! But it feels very processed. It feels very much like the cinematic equivalent of sugar cereal. It's just, I mean, some people really love that, but it's also not awesome. And where DC gets it right, and they've certainly missed hugely in the past, trying to develop this DCEU, but when they get it right, it doesn't feel like it's been made by a formula. It doesn't feel overly processed. It feels true to its origins. It feels like a comic book movie, and it's wild. It's absurd, and it should be. It's a comic book.